Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, we now know who the Dodgers leadoff hitter will be and who their leadoff pitcher will be. We'll talk about that plus some news and notes from spring training. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe in all those places so you won't ever miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, my name is Jeff Snider. That's my partner, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. And we've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, which is probably a good thing, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. So again, please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, and let's go ahead and talk about the Dodgers. Let's start with the big news out of camp, something we expect every spring training. There's always an announcement telling us who is going to be the opening day starter. And for the last 11 years, that answer has been Clayton Kershaw, even though that hasn't actually ended up being the case every one of those years. 2019 and 2020, for health reasons, Clayton Kershaw wasn't the opening day starter, but he has been going to be the opening day starter every year since Vicente Padilla back in 2010. Well, that streak is broken. Walker Buehler has been announced as the Dodgers opening day starter. And Vince, do you have strong feelings about this?
No, I think we talked about it last year, and I don't remember what we both said, but we were kind of expecting it to be Buehler last year. Then it ended up still being Kershaw. And, realistically, if it would have been Kershaw again, nobody was going to be upset. I think the cool thing about this year is that the way it sets up, Buehler could start opening day and the home opener, which is, always cool. Starting on the road. Opening day started on the road, it just feels a little bit different than, being the actual starter when you're at Dodger Stadium. But much like Walker Buehler, who I think Dave Roberts said shrugged and said cool when he told him, it's not too much of a big deal. I would imagine, as long as the Dodgers can lock up Buehler for the long term, this might start a streak for Walker Buehler of being opening day starter for a long time, unless Kershaw somehow announces like a farewell season, which I don't think he's going to do ever, but I think that'd be the only way. Walker Buehler is not the opening day starter for at least the next few years.
Yeah, although just the cynical way of looking at it, even if he did announce a farewell tour, you have Buehler start opening day and then Kershaw start the second day, and that's back-to-back high demand tickets. So financially, probably better for him to not be the opening day starter in that situation. But yeah, I think the writing was on the wall when Kershaw. He re-signed with the Dodgers for just over half what he has been making the last several years. And so I think that was an unspoken acknowledgement from Kershaw that he recognizes where he is at in his career, where he is at in the, I don't know if pecking order is quite the right phrase, but, among the Dodger pitchers, I guess he's still among the ones who are currently on the active roster. He's still probably the highest paid starting pitcher, making $1 million more than David Price is making from the Dodgers anyway. But, I think that was part of Kershaw's acknowledgement that this kind of is Walker Buehler's team now. And one of the points that Dave Roberts made was that Kershaw and Buehler are great friends. And what Roberts said was, besides Buehler, Kershaw's probably the most excited for Buehler about getting to start on opening day. And, like we said, Kershaw got to do it, 8 times? 8 or 9 times, I guess 9 times probably. I'm not good at counting, but he's done it a lot of times. And he and Buehler are friends. And I think that it's probably, we don't know what's going on in Kershaw's head, but it's hard to imagine Dave Roberts making this decision without at least running it by Kershaw first, I would think.
Yeah, and now as far everything we know about Dave Roberts is that he's a great communicator. Players have to play for him. There's never really been any issues out there in terms of people speaking, ill of him or even of being on the Dodgers and in the locker room. So you'd imagine it was a general conversation all around. Kershaw was fine with it. Obviously, Walker Buehler, was fine with it. I think the cool quote that he said is, getting to the major leagues was, the biggest part of it. He says, I think we all dream of getting to the big leagues. I think for me, everything else besides that has been icing on the cake, but it's a cool opportunity and an honor, and I'm looking forward to it. He while he downplays it, I do imagine that he does feel that pride and honor to be the opening day starter. He did mention how he feels about following Kershaw after Kershaw had been the guy for so long. So it's cool. And, he's already been the opening guy in the postseason, which in theory is more important than being the opening guy of the season. But now it becomes both. And, it's just a small passing of the torch, which in the long run doesn't mean too much. But, in the short term, it's cool. It's cool to see.
Yeah. And the only reason for Kershaw to be the opening day starter this year would have been tradition or, a nod to his greatness. And the Dodgers, I mean, one of the hallmarks of the last several years, as they've been such a great team, has been that we is a lot more important than me. They while they've had some personal accolades, every player seems committed to every current player seems committed to the idea of the team's performance, the team's uh, expectations being the most important thing. I can think of two people who maybe don't fit that bill. One of them has been jettisoned and is now playing in Korea, I believe, and the other one is waiting to find out if he's going to be suspended by MLB. But everybody else seems to be really on board with this teamwork aspect and really not just paying lip service to it, but actually believing that the team's success is the most important thing. And ultimately, it doesn't really matter who starts opening day. Kershaw and Buehler, if they're the 1 and 2 starters and they both stay healthy the whole year, they're both going to make 32 or 33 starts. And so it doesn't really matter the order. But the fact is, Walker Buehler, among the guys who are currently on the Dodgers roster, Walker Buehler was clearly the best pitcher last year and expected to be the best pitcher this year.
Yeah.
All right. So, that's the word on who will start opening day for the Dodgers. We also got word on who will be the Dodgers leadoff hitter this year. So we're going to come back and talk about that in a minute. We want to thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Let's talk about Built Bar for a minute. Built Bar is, as you know, the best tasting protein bar in the world. They're also extremely delicious and extremely healthy. Those two things don't come along together very often. It's easy to find one or the other, hard to find both together. Built Bar has done it. I don't really understand how, but they do it. And that's their number one focus, is to make something delicious that's also good for you. Every Built Bar is covered in chocolate, and there's a bunch of different flavors. If you don't know what flavor you like, you can order a mix box and they'll send you a bunch of different flavors, and then you can find out what you like. They also make these Built Puffs that are basically chocolate covered marshmallows that are also delicious and good for you. Everything they make is low carb, low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. So you really can't get better than that. So simply go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you will get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, we are back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. I also want to tell you about Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It is free and available wherever you get podcasts. So, Vince, on Thursday, in addition to finding out who the Dodgers opening day starter would be, we also found out who the Dodgers regular leadoff hitter is going to be. We talked about this the other day about kind of our ideal versions of the Dodgers starting lineup. And it seems like, I don't know if either of us had really strong opinions on who the leadoff hitter should be, but Dave Roberts has said that Mookie Betts is going to be the regular leadoff hitter simply because it seems like the main factor is that Mookie is just a lot more comfortable as a leadoff hitter. And with him and Trey Turner being somewhat interchangeable skill set wise, it makes sense to Roberts to put Mookie where he's most comfortable. Does it make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I had him as leadoff in my mock lineup the other day, And it's obviously Mookie Betts is a good hitter. He's gonna hit well, wherever he's situated. But in his career, he has over 3,000 plate appearances batting leadoff, and his next highest is batting second at 421 plate appearances. So it is a matter of comfort. We did see him the first year, I believe, kind of be in that two, maybe three hole a little bit. Didn't start off a little slow, went to the leadoff spot, and it seemed to click. For whatever reason, he's comfortable there. And if Trey Turner, doesn't really care, then, like you said, between Trey Turner, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman, you could literally bat them in any order. And your theory or your idea of just picking names out of a hat, it would work for those three. But, if he's more comfortable and the other people don't care, then I guess it makes more sense to have somebody in the comfort zone.
Yeah. My only concern here would be whether we know for sure that Trey Turner doesn't care. Simply because Trey Turner is a guy who the Dodgers presumably are hoping to sign to an extension to keep around long term. And if that is the case, if Turner, there's some. It's not like being a closer. I remember a few years ago when Craig Kimbrell was a free agent, and everybody was saying, "Well, why don't the Dodgers just sign him to be Kenley's setup man? That would be a lights out bullpen having two closers." And the easy answer was because Craig Kimbrell wouldn't sign somewhere to be somebody's setup man, because Craig Kimbrell's Hall of Fame case depends on him being a closer for a long time. And so I don't think leadoff hitter is quite the same way, but it's kind of that one spot in the lineup that there's actually stats attached to it. Leadoff home runs is a thing. Everybody knows that Ricky Henderson hit the most career leadoff home runs. Ronald Acuna Jr. has hit a bunch of leadoff home runs. It's a big, Jock Peterson has done a lot for the Dodgers. There are something about the leadoff spot is different than other spots in the order. And I guess that would be my only concern, is whether Trey Turner, if it's important to his personal identity as a ball player to be a leadoff hitter, would this possibly, make the Dodgers' chances of signing him long term go down a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, similar to the last segment where I would imagine Dave Roberts talked to them. I don't think, he just talked to Mookie only and said, okay, Mookie, you can be leadoff. It's a matter of if Trey Turner didn't feel as strongly or didn't speak up, that's a little bit on his end. If he did speak up, who knows what would happen? It would have been, maybe it would have been a deeper conversation and these guys would have had to figure it out. In terms of, keeping him around, Trey Turner, he hasn't given much indication, at least publicly, of how he really feels about being in LA. He's mentioned the fact that they're World Series contenders and that he likes that they go out and, that they go out and get guys in order to make run of the World Series. And he seems generally happy, but all the other reports are that he doesn't prefer the West Coast and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. He mentioned that he was open to an extension, but we haven't really heard much from the Dodgers side on that. So it's just an interesting thing. It seems like he was a guy that they got for this year. It never felt like, oh, we traded for Trey Turner. It felt like we traded for Max Scherzer. Trey Turner came along. Obviously, they moved him out of shortstop last year, which I'm sure he didn't love. But obviously, going from a team that wasn't going to make the playoffs to a team that did, change things. Would change your mind, or at least make it worth it. Had they re-signed Seager or brought in another shortstop, who knows how he would have felt about playing second base the entire season. So for me, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like the Trey Turner extension is something that's for sure coming. And it's more of a matter of you're around for the season, which sounds a little weird in terms of like, how the Dodgers are treating him. But that's just the general feeling around. We obviously don't know. I've never spoken with Trey Turner. I've never, seen anything other than what's put out there on social media or on TV. So I don't really know. But it does seem like he's kind of the guy that's along for the ride at this point. And then if it happens to work out, then it happens to work out.
Yeah, and if he's batting third behind Mookie and Freddie, it seems like he's going to have a lot of at bats with a runner in scoring position, and so maybe the increased RBI totals are enough to make up for not being the leadoff hitter. It is interesting to think about. Like, it's kind of wild to me that none of us have any idea what the Dodgers plans are with Trey long term, if they do hope to extend him or not. With when the Dodgers traded for Manny Machado in 2018, we kind of okay, yeah, there's a possibility they might want to re-sign him, but it was that one was pretty clearly Corey Seager is out for the year. We need a replacement. Let's go get Manny Machado, and they would have had to do some major reshuffling in their infield to actually re-sign Manny Machado. With Turner, there's a spot there. It's not necessarily a gaping hole in the Dodger. They do have Gavin Lux, who is naturally a shortstop, has been mostly a shortstop throughout his professional career. And so they do have somebody who could play there next year. But it seems like I would think they'd want to keep Trey long term. And so I guess I go back to what you said at the beginning, that we have to assume that these decisions weren't made in a vacuum and weren't announced in a vacuum, and that everybody involved is on board. And I guess that goes back to what we were talking about last segment too, about people just want to do what's best for the team. And Trey Turner showed, like you said, last year, that he's willing to do whatever it takes for the team to win, especially in the short term.
Yeah, and I think the one note, it's a different type of note, but Trey Turner is not a Boris guy, so it's not like, if it was a Boris guy, even Boris might be outspoken about, hey, this guy's in a contract year, he's a leadoff hitter. I don't know if he'd go out there and say it, but it might get leaked to John Heyman or somebody saying, Trey prefers to bat leadoff. But hopefully we don't see any of that. Like I said, hopefully it wasn't a conversation, and who knows? We've seen the lineup change before, and whatever happens. But as long as these guys, as long as Trey and is in the top three and he's getting 600-700 at bats a season, I think all works out. In terms of like actual leadoff, Trey Turner is faster. Mookie Betts has a better OBP over his career, so it's like I said, there's no wrong way to put him. And if Mookie feels super comfortable and nobody else spoke up to them feeling a different type of way, then I'm fine with the way it is right now.
Yeah, and the difference between the two, batting first versus batting third is like 10 to 20 plate appearances per season. It's not a huge difference. I think it's about 10 plate appearances per spot in the lineup. And so, and like we said, with the Dodgers' current 9, you're gonna have a former All-Star batting ninth every game. And so, that's just kind of the nature of the beast when you sign all the good players. So we'll deal with that problem, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about just some of the stuff we've been seeing in spring training, specifically on Thursday. Some people look good, and we got some news on a few people. So we're going to talk about, some updates on pitchers and hitters and all sorts of things. So thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. It's that time of year again. As college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Vince. So on Thursday, the Dodgers snatched a tie from the jaws of victory, giving up 3 runs in the bottom of the 9th inning to tie the Rockies 6-6. Dodgers. It's Eric Stevens' dream spring training so far. He loves spring training ties. I don't care, so I guess it's fine. But as we've talked about several times, the results don't matter, but what we see matters sometimes. And Tony Gonsolin and Tyler Anderson both made their spring debuts for the Dodgers, and they both looked pretty darn good. Tony Gonsolin was 9 up, 9 down, and command has been the issue for Tony Gonsolin in the past. He has very good stuff. His changeup is lights out. He has a good fastball to go with it. He has a good slider. It's really been all about command, keeping the pitch count down. Well, 3 innings on, I think, 23 pitches, 9 up, 9 down. Basically, you couldn't draw up a better performance from Tony Gonsolin, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's what you want to see. Obviously, it does make the short spring a little bit more intriguing, just based on the fact that right now, if you have a fight for the fifth spot, Tony Gonsolin's one of those guys. Tyler Anderson's one of those guys. They both look good in different ways. Gonsolin being efficient, Tyler Anderson racking up strikeouts, and you kind of want the other 2 weeks of spring to really let this play out. But the Dodgers, I'm sure, have a plan in mind. Piggybacking early on is going to be kind of an extended spring, I would imagine, for some of these guys, and then we'll kind of figure it out from there. But yeah, for Gonsolin specifically, I mean, we went a whole episode talking about pitching one time and didn't mention him. I think just based on, you look at the overall numbers from last season and they weren't bad for him, but we remember watching him pitch and it was never a fun time. It was a lot of nerves and a lot of people on base, and he kind of escaped some jams that pushed back to the 2020 postseason when he didn't really do too well there either. Kind of struggled there, and the last time you really think of Tony Gonsolin being good was 2020 regular season. So it's been a while for some people, and he's a guy that he was hurt last year, came back, and never quite figured it out. Was kind of thrust into it because they needed him, and maybe got a little bit of an unfair view from us and maybe from other fans. And he's a guy that still has stuff. He had, like I said, mentioned, he had good stuff and will definitely be a factor for the Dodgers this year, to imagine. Or if he's not a factor for the Dodgers, a factor in why the Dodgers bring in another starting pitcher that is maybe more established or a little bit better.
Yeah, and I'm a big Tony Gonsolin fan. I've always felt bad for him from the 2020 postseason because that postseason was so weird because there were no days off, and so going into that Padres series, you knew there was a chance of 5 games in 5 days, which means you had to have 5 starters for that series. And Tony Gonsolin was that fifth starter. And they didn't need him in that series. And he didn't pitch in the Brewers series. They didn't need him, but they had to hold on to him for the Padres series. So by the time he pitched in the NLCS, it had been I think it was like 18 or 19 days between appearances. And so that's just, it's really hard to be in a groove. And then, oh, by the way, it's not just any game, it's a postseason game against a very good team. So there were a lot of challenges. And I feel like, even last year, he was never really able to get in that groove, partly because of injury and, his nagging health issues. So, we were talking a week or two ago about the potential rotation. I said I would love for the Dodgers to be in a situation where they can just let Tony Gonsolin start 28 or 30 games for a season and see what he can be, because I am a big fan of his stuff, and like you said, his results have been pretty good. There has been some high wire acts and in some of those games that he's pitched, but overall, he's also had a little bit of bad luck in his career. And all in all, he's been a pretty darn good pitcher. And I would love to see. I don't think he'd be a Cy Young candidate, but I could easily see him being, having a 3.3 ERA over the course of a season, which in this day and age is really, really good and would absolutely make him one of the best back of a rotation starters in baseball. And I think that potential is there. And this isn't just based on what I saw on Thursday. This is my overarching feelings about Gonsolin. But it made me happy for him to see that maybe, hopefully Thursday was a sign that he has addressed some of those command issues and can get more efficient. I always think back to Clayton Kershaw as a young pitcher, and the big knock on him was he wasn't efficient enough, and so he couldn't go deep into games, and so he had a ton of no decisions, and just he couldn't pitch deep in a game because he's throwing too many pitches. And Kershaw turned out okay, and I don't necessarily think Tony Gonsolin is the next Clayton Kershaw, but I do think there is potential for him to really take a big leap if he can get that efficiency.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a matter of what the Dodgers' plan is, and like I said, they have a plan. We don't know it yet. Right now, you'd have Walker, Julio, Kershaw, Heaney, Anderson, just based on guys. They signed Heaney to be a starter. He said that when he was signed. Tyler Anderson, I don't know if they ever said it, but I would imagine that's why they signed him, to be a starter or to compete for a fifth spot and or that swing role, that Ross Stripling type role where you fill in where you needed, or make a spot start if they want to go to six starters in the rotation for a little bit. Whatever the case is, it does seem early on, maybe now, especially with the 28-man roster and no limits on pitchers. They could go heavy on pitchers right there in the first month and do those piggyback starts and get people into their length that they want in terms of how many pitches they can throw. But he's a guy who I don't wouldn't necessarily say it's a make or break year for him as a major leaguer, but definitely a make or break year for him in terms of where he fits on the Dodgers and what his future is as a Dodger.
Yeah. And, speaking of make or break years, we have a guy who kind of had a broken year last year, and that's Edwin Rios, who, last year he missed most of the season after shoulder surgery. And even when he was playing, he was really, really bad. And that probably had to do with the shoulder issue. I think it was probably already an issue, and that's why he was so bad. He only hit one home run last year, and that was it wasn't a weak shot at 409 feet, but it was kind of a wall scraper to right center field in Oakland. Not a majestic blast like some of the ones we've seen from Edwin Rios. Well, on Thursday, we saw one of those more majestic blasts, a no doubter off the bat. I didn't see a launch angle. I don't know if we have launch angles in spring training right now, but I would guess it was like, 194,000 degree launch angle. It was really high, and it cleared the fence by plenty. And so that was kind of the Edwin Rios that I've missed. And for me, that was a really good sign, simply because one of the things we've seen in the past, whether it's Adrian Gonzalez or David Wright or any number of guys who've had shoulder surgery, sometimes that power never comes back, and sometimes it takes a long time to come back. And we've seen Edwin Rios hit the ball really hard already this spring, excuse me. And so it seems like I know not all shoulder injuries and shoulder surgeries are created equal, but it seems like Edwin Rios's power is back.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it when we were talking about Beatty and DFA. I think what he's shown this spring, maybe gave them a little more confidence in making that Matt Beatty decision. In terms of getting him and Matt Beatty aren't exactly the same. He plays a stronger third base, can play first base. Beatty's more first base, corner outfield. But similar roles, and I think for the Dodgers specifically this year, Edwin Rios is a great fit. Obviously, they needed him last year just in terms of having a guy who could hit the ball off the bench instead of guys that could maybe hit the ball. But he also fits because if Justin Turner ends up getting a few more starts at DH, and he's a guy that can play that third base position. So Chris Taylor played some last year. Max Muncy can play third base, but he hasn't really done it too much, and he hasn't ever really looked great at it. So he's a guy that really fills a role for the Dodgers in terms of what they need, and obviously being that bat off the bench when he's not actually in the field. So it's good to see. It's fun to see. Obviously he had some big home runs, not just in terms of launch angle and how far they went, but in terms of being clutch home runs for the Dodgers in when he was healthy. And if he can continue to do that, it just adds to the excitement of them having a competent bench and guys that can make contact with the ball and change the game with one swing.
Absolutely. It's exciting stuff. One last little note from Thursday. Dave Roberts was talking about Tommy Kahnle and said he hasn't hasn't faced batters yet, but that his stuff is looking good. We've seen Caleb Ferguson in games, and the two of them have kind of been lumped together in some conversations. Both guys recovering from Tommy John surgery and hoping to make an impact this year. Seems like even though I think their Tommy John surgeries were around the same time. It seems
A
like
month
Ferguson.
apart.
Yeah, it seems like Ferguson is a little bit ahead of Kahnle in progression right now.
Yeah, Dave Roberts said like he hasn't faced live hitters yet, hasn't thrown on back-to-back days yet, so there's still a lot of checks for him to cross off before he can help the Dodgers. But if he says the stuff looks good, we got to trust him on that. And he's a guy that you talked to last year when the Dodgers first signed him, and he's a guy that seems. Dave Roberts did said when he is in there, he's going to be a leverage guy, and that's something the Dodgers don't they're always going to need leverage guys. They already have a few, but adding another leverage guy, if we can push Phil Bickford to like the 7th or 8th reliever, that's a sign of a really good bullpen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kahnle has great stuff when he's healthy. There's no question about that. And so, I'm sure it'll be a little bit of a roller coaster. Even when he was healthy, he was sometimes a roller coaster kind of guy, but the stuff is there. And so I'm excited to see what the Dodgers can do with him. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us for this week, right, Vince?
Yeah, the one thing we maybe could have touched on, but I don't think it's that big a deal. I think that's the way you have to think. Dave Roberts, there's like a guarantee out there that the Dodgers are going to win the World Series. He said, "We are winning the World Series in 2022. We'll win the World Series this year, put it on record." But then, he goes on about it and said, "It'd be crazy not to think that. I believe in this organization. We're going to put ourselves in that position, and we've got to finish it this year." He said, "Everyone in this organization better believe that." So, while he's saying it, it's one of those where, yeah, he's saying it, but what else do you want him to say?
Yeah, and I think I saw that there was also a little if the rotation stays healthy kind of qualifier in there. And so but yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right. If they play up to their potential, they're definitely the best team in baseball on paper. And so but as I say, that's why they play the games. So.
Yeah, and as unfortunately we've seen that a few times play out.
Yes, we have. So that's going to do it for us for today and for this week. We want to thank you all again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, where Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. If you're not listening or watching every day, we would love it if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you haven't yet subscribed on YouTube, please do that there. Those numbers help us very much, and we appreciate all of you who have. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I am on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com. And our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Have a good one.